If you have your Bibles, let's turn them to Daniel chapter 2. We'll skip up ahead. How about that? Daniel chapter 2, I'm excited to be with you today because today we're going to conclude our series, But God. And I have really enjoyed working on through this series with you and the study and the preparation of it and delivering the Word of God to you. Because there's been so many times in my own life that I don't know what I would do if God had not intervened. And every time that my life seemed to be spiraling out of control, God was there. And so even in those times, and today, the sermon title of the day in this part of our series would be called, We Do Not Know What Tomorrow Holds, But God Knows, you see. And we don't. But I want you to think of the word prophecy as you turn in there in Daniel chapter 2. Think of the word prophecy. I want you to think of all the things that comes to mind and the predictions of the future. One thing that as a Christian man and being raised in church world, one thing I know about the word prophecy is prophecy usually equals out to big crowds. Big crowds show up when you start talking about prophecy. People are very interested and infatuated with prophecy, and also big money. What I mean by that is if you want to write a book that will sell, even in the Christian world, write it on prophecy, and people will buy that book. If you want to put people in seats at conferences, have a conference on prophecy, end-time prophecy, and you know what? People are going to show up. You want a sermon series everybody listen to, let it be on prophecy, and people are going to show up. I remember a few years ago, David Jeremiah did a big series on prophecy in the end times, and everybody was talking about it, which means everybody by default was then listening to it. And even the secular world has caught on to this, and the secular world has cashed in on trying to tell people's future. Falsely, but they have cashed in on it. And there's this company that I discovered this week in preparation and thinking about it and was wondering how much has the secular world really cashed in on trying to tell people their future as far as palm readers and tarot card readers and horoscopes and all that nonsense. And what I found was there was this company called the Wonton Food Company. And the Wonton Food Company, they produce fortune cookies. All right, that's an American thing I found out. I didn't know that. That ain't Chinese. That's us. We brought alive that monster. And you know that the Wonton Food Company, they ship out on a daily basis 5 million fortune cookies a day. Not a week, not a month, but 5 million fortune cookies a day. They have an entire team of writers who writes the fortunes that goes into the fortune cookies that you get. A team of them. Now, they write things 10 words or less is what their goal is. 10 words or less, and they find inspiration from anything from sporting events to subway signs, all sorts of stuff they find inspiration on. And they have to regenerate ever so many years 15,000 different fortunes just to keep it fresh and active and things such as that. So I guess if you're ever not doing good in life and you need a job, you could probably, if you could write 10 words that make sense, you could get a job with them. But when you look in the entirety of this world and its society and how it's trying to predict using horoscopes and tarot card readings and all that, I wanted to know how much money is being cashed in off this thing. This is what I found. That in 1 year, this type of industry brings in $2 billion a year. $2 billion from palm reading to horoscopes to fortune cookies, the tarot card readings and the psychic hotlines and all of that mess that you see, that $2 billion a year is being spent in it. Now that tells me that people want to know what lies around the corner in their life that they're not so sure about. And some of these things, they get cashed in off these big scary tactics and all that. How many people remember Y2K? Remember Y2K, and everybody was all panicked that the computer system would crash and all of that mess. And then it wasn't but a few years later, and the History Channel was cashing in on 2012 and the Mayan calendar. It ends in 2012, and we're all going to die in 2012 and all of that stuff. Well, that got me interested on around how many times, and I'm not even going to go there on how many times people have made predictions on this, but here's a few of them. In 1941, the Jehovah's Witnesses publicized that they believed that the world was going to end in 1941. When it did not end in 1941, they made a second guess of 1975. Now, back up a few years, in 1967, you remember Jim Jones said the world's going to end. 1969, Charles Manson said the world was going to end. Pat Robertson, that you see on TV, guessed it to be 1982. When that failed, he re-guessed it again to be 2007. We're still here. Lester Summerall made a prediction that in 1985 the world was going to end. Nostradamus was famous for 1999, if you remember. And then when the whole blood moon kicked off, a guy by the name of Mark Blitz predicted the world was going to end at it on 2008. And then John Hagee cashed in with, nope, you're wrong, it's 2014. So apparently prophecy and prediction of the future and things like that is a big deal to us. And the question is why? Why is it such a big deal? What is it about human nature? It craves to know what lies around the corner in the unknown. And the only thing that I can describe it as is we're just scared. We're terrified of the unknown. We're terrified of uncertain times. We're terrified of what we cannot see. Now, when I was a teenager and in my early 20s as well, you know what I love to do? I love to sit on the side of a riverbank. I love to get on a boat, go to a sandbar and swim and fish from the sandbar and just ski and inner tube. And well, I was the guy who spotted people that did that. I wasn't quite brave enough. I tubed some, but not much. And so anyway, but I love doing stuff like that. And then something happened when I turned 30. God came down and gave me the greatest revelation I've ever had in my life. You know what it was? I'm going to die. One day I'm going to die. I'm not some superhuman that's just going to keep living forever and ever. Now, when God showed me that I'm just a human, I'm going to die one day, and that became a reality in my life, the next time I went to the river, you know what happened? You know what I saw? Alligators, and I saw them everywhere. And I realized something for the first time, that if they could eat cows and everything else is trying to creep around there, because people in Colombia had missing cows every now and then, they'd always say it was the gators that got them when they went down to the edge of the water. Well, if they could eat that, it could eat me. And all of a sudden, I didn't like swimming in that muddy water anymore. I like swimming in clear water. You know what I mean? I want to go in a pool. I still swim at the beach and stuff like that, but at least I swim where I could see. We go to some areas on the coast and it's brown water, you know, where all the fresh water's coming out from rivers. And I don't like swimming there because I can't see what's about to eat me. I want to see what's about to eat me. And so that's what it's like. But beloved, that's what prophecy does for us when it's God-given prophecy from the Bible. It gives us enough insight that we can see some detail of what's coming around the corner. The same thing could be said with traveling. You think about traveling. When Liz and I, we travel the coastline a lot because of Micah's back appointments down in Tampa, and we go to all these little fishing villages and all that. We just love stuff like that. And when we're doing that, I'm one of those men who don't like the GPS. I don't like it much. I use what I call my Indian instincts to get me around. You know what I mean? I'm sure some of you like that. But there is a problem. The problem with my Indian instincts is I only got about 4 drops of Indian blood in me, right? And so they fail me every time, and eventually I have to suck up my pride and pull off that highway and set the GPS to try to figure out where we're going to go. When I do that, one of the things that I can't stand about it, and Dad and I was traveling this last week to Pensacola to pick up a horse trailer, and he was just like me, I noticed. one thing we don't like about that GPS is it tells you 100 feet from your turn to turn left, turn left in 100 feet. The problem is you're running 70 and you can't stop fast enough and you can't change lanes fast enough. I want to know what's coming up way ahead. Don't tell me 100 feet from now to turn. Tell me 3 miles ahead is what I'm trying to say. We are a people who like to know what's around the corner. We like to know what's coming ahead. And it's probably because of just good old-fashioned self-preservation. We want to survive. There's something about us that when God designed creation, he designed us to want to live, to fight to live, to want that. I believe that that's why every one of us are even eternally wired to want to live. We want to live forever. The Christian will live forever with their Creator. But I said all that to tell you that's what we don't like about surprises. That we do have this type of self-preservation. And even in America right this moment, there's so many people who's really finding themselves antsy every time you turn on a television, because every time we turn on the television, we're receiving bad news. Like this year more than any other year that I can ever remember. I mean, it wasn't long ago we was finding out about this just weird, strange virus thing, and no one knows what to make of it. Is it bad? Is it not? We just so many unknown factors in it all. And so you hear one story where somebody, it just ate them alive. You hear another story where somebody tested positive and didn't even have a symptom in them. I mean, it's just so weird. And right behind that, we had, remember the murder hornets? I don't know what happened to those. I guess they died, but they were murder hornets. Remember that? I mean, that don't sound, hornets sound bad. You put murder in front of hornet and it gets 10 times worse, And so right behind that, you got all the looting and the rioting and what just seems to be just an attack on our society. And then, what was it this week? You start hearing about Saharan dust. And so what I'm trying to say is it's only 6 months into this bad boy. And so we got like a whole another half a year to go. And it kind of leaves you saying, God, what's next? The problem is not in asking God what's next. The problem is when we don't trust God. So then we go back to the world structure and we try to ask the world what is next. We ask human beings what is next. And we started getting ourselves in a place where we start asking men, and it's impossible for men and women to tell us what is next. They don't know. In fact, listen to this one writer, Peter Drucker, said this: trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down an old country road at night with no lights on while trying to look out the back window. You ain't getting there, okay? You ain't getting there. Now, the future is absolutely mysterious to every one of us. But the cool thing is that God specializes in telling his people and predicting the future. Now, let's talk about biblical prophecy for just a minute. Because what sets us apart and worshipers of the one true God is in our Bible, there are tons and tons of prophecy. In fact, 1/4 of the Word of God is nothing but prophecy. 1/4 of it. Now, if God dedicated 1/4 of his Word for our well-being to know what to look for, what to conform to through the centuries, you better believe that it's important. It's important to him. It should be important to us. The great thing about Christianity is it actually fulfills its prophecies. When you look at the Quran, you don't see fulfillment of prophecy. When you look at the Buddha, you don't see prophecy and fulfillment of prophecy. You see, prophecy is risky business because if you get it wrong, no one believes you anymore. You see what I'm saying? And another thing about prophecy that is really amazing with the Word of God, because it goes so extreme with it, is this: the more you say about your prophecy, the more layers you stack on, the more details you give a prophecy, the riskier it is to speak it. Because that's more details you could get wrong in that one prophecy. Let me give you an example. If I was to say in the 2:00 hour, a man's going to walk through that door, that's not really that big of a deal. It's extremely possible a man could walk through that door in the 2:00 hour of any day of the week. But now if I was to get a little bit more detailed than that, and I was to say this blonde hair, blue-eyed gentleman wearing gray slacks and a red shirt, accompanied by his 11-year-old daughter, is going to walk through the door to my left, not that door, but the door to my left at approximately 2:17 in the afternoon. Now, and that happened, that is something to wow about. That's the type of stuff that God does, beloved. Let me show you something. I want you to see something. When the Bible predicts the coming of Jesus Christ, the Messiah Yeshua, when we see that prediction coming, those men of God layered that so thick that there's somewhere around 300 to 330 details that Jesus Christ fulfilled. Let me give you a few of them right here. Isaiah 7, he was going to be born of a virgin. Micah 5, he was going to be born in the city of Bethlehem. Genesis, from the tribe of Judah. Isaiah again, he would begin in Galilee. Isaiah 35, he would work miracles. Zechariah 9, he would enter Jerusalem on a donkey. Psalms 41, he betrayed a friend. Zechariah 11, he would be sold for 30 pieces of silver. Isaiah 53, he was going to be wounded, he was going to be bruised. Listen to this one, I love it, it's my favorite one. Psalms 22, his hands and his feet will be pierced. Isaiah 53, he will be crucified between thieves. Psalms 22, his garments will be torn and they will be casted in lots for them. Psalms 34, his bones will not be broken. I love the movie, The Passion of the Christ, because one of the details that they got in The Passion of the Christ is when they were trying to hurry up and kill Jesus off, and they took this giant hammer and they broke the knees of the two thieves on the outside of Jesus so that they would hang with all of their weight and die out faster. When they got to Jesus, they went to draw it back, and then they put the hammer died because God said they would not break one bone in his body. Zechariah 12 says that he will be pierced on his side. Isaiah 53 says that he would be buried in a rich man's tomb. Psalm 16 says that he will raise from the dead. And it goes on and on and on. All of these great details that this one man in Jesus Christ fulfilled. That's the type of good stuff that the Bible is giving us through God's holy word. God is the only one that has the ability to say what the morrow is going to bring, because he's the only one that knows what the morrow is going to bring. And so I don't want you to get into biblical prophecy thinking, a biblical prophecy is just a good guess. No, it's not just a good guess. I'm going to tell you what biblical prophecy is. It's good news to a guessing world. When the world guess what's going to come tomorrow, God says this is going to come tomorrow, and it does come to pass. And you know why God does that? I'll tell you why God does that. In part, God does that to put your mind at ease. Listen, we're not just going through this uncertain time. We're not just going through this unknown world with someone who's never seen it before. We're going through this with one who hadn't just been there and done that, or as the expression says, been there, done that, got the t-shirt for it. My friend, we're going through it with the guy who owns the t-shirt shop. Okay, we're going through this uncertain time with a guy who owns the manufacturing plant that sells the t-shirts to the t-shirt shop. Okay, we serve a God who knows the end from the beginning. We don't know what tomorrow holds, but God knows, you see. So look at Daniel chapter 2. That was just my intro. You got time? Just playing with you. Daniel chapter 2. The first thing I want us to see is we do not know what tomorrow holds. You do not know? I do not know. Look at Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. The second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. He was very troubled. He couldn't sleep at night. You know that feeling. Verse 2, then the king commanded that all the magicians, all the enchanters, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and they stood before the king. Now, let's give a little context for those who might not understand what's going on here. Nebuchadnezzar is the top dog of the world, okay? He is leading the greatest empire of the world in its prime. He's a little concerned what's going to happen with my tomorrow, who's going to take my kingdom after I die, and who's going to lead it. Is another empire going to come up and wipe us out? What's going to happen? And he starts to have this dream that's given by God, apparently, and about the future of things. And he can't understand what that dream means, okay? So what does he do? Well, he's going to get all of his wise men. He's a pagan guy, so he gets all of his sorcerers and all of his magicians. And we would say they would be palm readers and tarot card readers and horoscope people of this day and time. He gets them all together, and he says this: I want you to tell me what my dream means. Now, he's a smart man. Oh, Nebi's real smart. Because Nebi knows that you ain't going to tell the king no bad news. He's going to cut your head off if you tell him something bad. You're going to tell him what he wants to hear. And he knows that. And because he really wants the real truth, the bottom line truth, this is what he does. He says, I want you to tell me the meaning of my dream, but I ain't going to tell you my dream. If you truly are as big and bad as you say you are, you can tell me my dream and then you can interpret my dream. And they get upset because they can't do it. Okay, so you see that he's already not really believing in these people anyway. Oh, yeah, and if they fail to do so, he's going to have them all killed. Now let's go to verse 10. This is what they say. The Chaldeans answer the king, and they said, there's not a man on earth that can meet the king's demands, for no great or powerful king has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or a Chaldean. Now, he's already troubled. Now they're telling him, hey man, what you're asking for cannot be done. But you know what he's doing that's wrong? He's turning to human beings. These supposed magicians and horoscope and astrologers and these, where we get our word magi in the Bible, the three wise men that come sing Jesus, this is their heritage, okay? And it's amazing what God used in order to bring those people to Jesus Christ. So remember that when you're witnessing the people on the street, that God used something really foul to lead the magi to Jesus. And I believe it's because they had their heritage here and they seen what God did in the life of Nebuchadnezzar, and they passed that down from generation to generation. They spent time with Daniel, and they knew that Daniel knew of a coming Messiah that he probably told them, that went in their heritage and their talks to their kids and their kids and their kids, until when the day come when they seen that star, they said, I remember what Daniel said. The God of Daniel said that there's going to be a Messiah, and we're going to go meet this Messiah. And God leads these men to himself. It's amazing how far God's arm stretches out in the world that we don't have any idea about. Let's go back to the scripture. But here's the thing. They're wrong. He's wrong in doing this with these men. Because, beloved, let me tell you something, okay? If you call yourself a child of God, listen to me. If you call yourself a child of God and you are turning to horoscopes and witches and tarot card readers and palm readers and all of these things to bring insight to your future, what you are doing is turning to demons. I believe that with all of my heart. Those things are of the devil. They're of demons. Don't have nothing to do with this. In fact, Deuteronomy 18 says this. Deuteronomy 18:10 says, there shall be found among you, they shall not be found among you, anyone who burns his sons or daughters on an offering. That was when they were sacrificing to Moloch. Anyone who practices in a nation, listen, that's telling the future, palm reading and card reading and such, or telling fortunes or interpreting omens, or a sorcerer, you're turning into a charmer or a medium or a necromancer, that's a magician or a wizard of some sort, or one who inquires of the dead. Listen to this, what God says in verse 12 here. He says, for whoever does these things is an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. Don't turn to them. So what do? Well, you don't know what tomorrow holds, but God does. We turn to God. Now, at this point in our scripture, Daniel is about to come on the scene for the first time in this chapter, because Daniel believes that the future can be told if God reveals it to him. He understands that God exists on the outside the confines of time. Look at the 15th verse of Daniel chapter 2. He, Daniel, declared to Arioch, that was the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? In other words, why is he going to kill everybody who can't tell him what this means, okay? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel. Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he may show the interpretation of the king. Daniel wanted to pray about it. That's what we should do. Daniel wanted to pray. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Rashab, Meshach, and Abednego, and his companions. And he told them to seek mercy from God from God of the heavens concerning this matter. So what do? They want to know the future. They wanted to be delivered. They had a but God moment, and they remembered God. They cried out to God, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Verse 19, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. I want you to pay attention to what Daniel does, because now God's going to reveal this matter to Daniel. Daniel, don't run to Nebuchadnezzar and just start spilling it all out. This is what it is. What does Daniel do? Before he ever leaves his house, it says, then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. He spent time praising God before he went out about the business. Verse 20, and Daniel said, blessed be the name of God forever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes the times and the seasons. He moves kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals the deep and the hidden things. He knows what is in darkness, and in light dwells in him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and you have made known to me what we ask of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Beloved, God is omniscient. God is all-knowing. All-knowing. There is not one single day that God learns something new. Okay? He is all-knowing. Never learned something new. As an old pastor I heard once say this, has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? Nothing has ever occurred to God. There's not been one day that God's been sitting on the throne and said, you know what, I didn't think about that. Never. Nothing occurs to God, because he is, his knowledge is just so pure. It's immediate, and it's so complete, and it never weakens with time. Like our brain, it gets lesser and lesser with age, but not God's. It never weakens, because God is eternal. He lives on the outside of time. Do you know what eternity is? It is the absence of time itself. It is not bound by some timeline in which God has to flow in and work in. Listen, time isn't nothing but a part of creation, people. We act like time's just this impossible force that cannot be stopped. But you need to understand something. When God created everything else you see, he created something called time. Think about it in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. What does it say? In the beginning, God created. In the beginning of what? In the beginning of time itself, you see. And God doesn't live in time itself. God is just eternal. He just always has been and always will be. He's totally different from you and I. And that's what makes him so powerful. And that's why it's such a blasphemy when we go to men about our future instead of God who lives on the outside of time. But here's the good news. The good news is that though God lives on the outside of time, and that's hard to fathom, isn't it? Isn't that hard to fathom? You think about that. He never grows older. He never gets tired, never gets bored. Doesn't really need anything. And that's hard to understand. And the only way I've ever been able to help my own self understand it is, if you go to a parade, and you probably heard this before. You go to a parade, and the marching band comes by, and then another school's marching band, and fire trucks, and the Shriners guy with the funny hats and the go-karts and all of that stuff. They come by, but you can only see what's in front of you. You can only see what's passing by your timeline. But if you was in a helicopter and you was above that, looking above that street view, you can see the entire parade all at once. You can see the beginning and the end. You can see that this high school band is in front of this high school band, and that's in front of the police department, and that's in front of the firefighters. And that's how God sees everything in history. He sees the whole thing all at once because he's outside of it, though he's so close and personal. And the good news is he doesn't leave us out in the cold. He doesn't leave me out in the cold. He doesn't leave you out in the cold. But he shares a certain amount of knowledge with us that we can have peace. Look at verse 26. The king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar. He says this, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered. I want you to pay really close attention to this because this is where our but God statement comes from. Daniel answered the king, no wise man or enchanter or magician or astrologer can show the king the mystery that he's asked. In other words, ain't a man on this planet can do what you've asked. But look at verse 28 because it makes all the difference in the world. Here's our but God statement. But there is a God in heaven. What is this God in heaven does? Who reveals mysteries. He says this, and he has made known to Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days, your dream and your visions of your head as you lay in the bed are these. Verse 29, to you, O king, as you lay in the bed came thoughts of what would be after this, and he who reveals the mysteries made known to you what is to be. Verse 30, but as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all that lives. In other words, Daniel's saying, I'm but a man. I'm just a man. I'm not a sorcerer. I'm not a magician. I'm not none of that crazy stuff. I'm just a man. But look what he says. But in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, that you may know the thoughts of your mind. So you can have peace of mind about this. Now, God doesn't leave us hanging out in the cold, beloved. Now, God don't tell us everything of the future, and I'm glad. I don't want to know what every day is going to be like in my life. There's going to be some days I wouldn't want to come outside of my bedroom if I knew what I was going to get into that day, right? I don't want to live my life in a closet. I love my life, and I love to live the life that God gives me. And I can't do that in a closet, hiding scared. I got to come out. And when I come out, then I can enjoy that abundance of life that God gave me. I believe in being smart. I believe in not being stupid. But at the same time, I believe in living the life that God has given me. And this is what God does. He reveals a certain amount of knowledge to us. And he's been doing it since the beginning of time. Before Daniel ever went to Babylon in captivity, God told these people, you're going into captivity. And God told them, you're going to come out of captivity. He gave them a warning. He told them that it was coming. Before God ever came in the flesh as Jesus Christ, for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, he says, I'm coming in the flesh in Jesus Christ. I'm coming in the flesh in Jesus Christ. And this is how you can know he's going to be pierced in his hands and his feet, and he's going to be pierced in his side. When you see all these things, you know that that is my son. Even the book of Revelations, what does it do? It talks about tribulations, and it talks about a rapture. It talks about this coming of Jesus Christ and the millennial reign and all of these things so that you will know. Even in the book of Acts, in New Testament time, you have this prophet named Agabus, and God speaks to this prophet named Agabus, and he says, you know what? There's going to be a great, great, great famine. And you know what it says in Acts chapter 11? In Acts chapter 11, those disciples of Jesus Christ listened to that prophet, and they made moves upon that to set themselves outright. They gave more money to the church to help those in need, and they got through that time. God cares about his people. He doesn't want his people to be caught off guard. He doesn't keep man. Oh, I love what Jesus said, because Jesus told Peter, you are now my friend, and you don't keep stuff hidden from just servants, but you let your friends know what's coming down the road. And that's exactly what God does for every one of us. He reveals these things so that we can have some peace of mind. But that is not the only reason why God does it. In conclusion, God also makes these matters come to light for us so that we will sit in awe in his great power. You ever heard of a sign and wonder? What does a sign and wonder do? Well, it makes you wonder. And in its finishing act, it makes you awe at God and his majesty, his glory, his power. And as a result of that, what happens to our faith? Our faith begins to rise higher and higher and higher. If there's anything in America we need, it's to stand on faith, solid faith, and let that faith rise and rise and rise. Not so you can just have a peace of mind, but so you can get off your hiney and get on the battlefield. You see. Listen to this. I didn't write this. I wish I did. It's beautiful, but let me share it with you. God doesn't just want to inform people of his plan. He does want to inform people. That's apparent. That's biblical. But he doesn't only want to inform people of his plan. He wants to conform people to his plan. Do you understand the difference? He don't want you to just know what he's doing. He wants you to know what he's doing so you will join him in what he's doing. Because you know what God does? God uses people. God could have slayed Goliath, but you know what? He got more glory in taking a little weak little 15-year-old punk and sending him out there and slaying Goliath, didn't he? Listen, I say this all the time that we need to understand is when we think about Samson in the Bible, and you see the movie Samson, it's this big old muscle-bound guy like me, right? Well, my mama thinks I am. But listen, that's not what Samson looked like. I'm going to be shocked if I get to heaven and see a muscle-bound up Samson. How's God going to get glory in a six-pack, big, bulging bicep Samson? You know how God gets glory? When he takes somebody really small, really frail, and he fills them with so much might, there's nothing else that can explain it but God's power upon his life. You see? We always talk about a man of God this and a man of God that. The only way you'll ever know a real man of God is God upon the man. And if God's not on the man, he's not a man of God, you see. It's all about God's glory, not human glory. And God, he does these things so that we will come apart and come aside of him. And that's what I want to encourage you this morning. That's what we've been encouraging you for weeks, is to get on the battlefield.